Clara's 60-year-old fingers traced a cracked spine in charity shop when eavesdropping slapped her sideways. Some bloke swore Middlemarch cured his divorce. Absolute rubbish, she thought, until spotting a flyer for a book club meeting above a bakery that smelled of burnt scones. Vibes were off, but so was grief since Frank passed. That night, she tucked his old Catch 22 under one arm, he'd hated it, and marched past mismatched teacups towards strangers swapping paperbacks like battle stories. London drizzle couldn't. Clara's 60-year-old fingers traced a cracked spine in musty corner of a Camden bookshop, its pages whispering secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. Grief had settled into her bones like an uninvited guest overstaying its welcome, heavy as a winter coat in July. But today, she dragged herself here, one clumsy step at a time, because someone had mentioned a book club. Not just any club. One where dog-eared novels swapped hands like shared memories, where spines cracked louder than hearts. Old novel in her grip smelled of lavender and neglect, same as her mother's bedside table years ago. That was fear, wasn't it? Losing herself in pages only to find echoes of loss staring back, like catching her reflection in a train window, blurred, fleeting, never quite hers. Yet shop buzzed with warm vibes, shelves lined with well-loved paperbacks and sticky notes poking out like friendly waves. A chalkboard announced next week's meetup, bring a book that healed you. She hesitated. Then, with a resolve that surprised even her, Clara tucked novel under her arm. If grief was a tide, maybe stories were rocks she could cling to, jagged, solid, something to brace against. Around her, laughter bubbled from a group debating a thriller near Till, their camaraderie as comforting as a well-stoked fire. London's drizzle pattered against window, but inside, something flickered. Not hope, not yet. But quiet thrill of a first sentence, promise of a story waiting to unfold. Clara's 60-year-old fingers traced a cracked spine in a musty corner of bookshop, its pages whispering secrets of lives lived and lost. She hadn't planned on joining a book club, let alone one for grieving souls, but grief had a way of rewriting plans. That morning, she'd tripped over a loose cobblestone, gracefully, she liked to think, only to be caught by a woman clutching a stack of novels like path rafts. You've got vibes of someone who needs a cuppa and a story, stranger had said, steering her toward a backroom where mismatched chairs circled like old friends. Inside, shelves groaned under dog-eared paperbacks, each one a relic of someone's heartache or hope. A community book swap, they called it, leave a story, take a story, but never same one twice. She hesitated, then placed her late husband's favorite novel on pile, its margin scribbled with his terrible jokes. Letting go felt like losing him again, but woman, Maggie, as it turned out, handed her a tattered copy of Middlemarch with a wink. Trust me, love. Elliot's got your back. Weeks blurred into a rhythm of shared silences and sudden laughter, of stumbling through metaphors that made grief feel less like a weight and more like weather. She learned to navigate this new terrain, way Joan could dissect a mystery novel but couldn't find her keys, how young Priya hid poetry in her sleeves like contraband. Even Maggie's terrible puns grew on her, a stubborn dandelion in cracked pavement. One rainy evening, woman found herself leading discussion on Secret Garden, her voice steady as she traced theme of renewal. It's not about forgetting, she said, thumb brushing novel's faded cover. It's about making room for both thorn and bloom. Room hummed, a chorus of nods and sniffles, and in that moment, old book in her hands felt less like an ending and more like a bookmark, holding a place for whatever came next. By summer, she'd organized a fundraiser, stacking donated books into teetering towers for a local hospice. When a frazzled mum dropped a first edition Pride and Prejudice into her lap, creator didn't flinch. Darling, she chuckled, Jane Austen survived worse than sticky fingers. Crowd erupted, and as sunlight pooled over bookstall, Clara realized grief hadn't shrunk, but her world had grown around it, wide enough to hold all stories yet to come. Clara's 60-year-old fingers traced a cracked spine in musty backroom of Primrose Pages, a London bookshop stubbornly clinging to path between a shuttered bakery and a too-trendy juice bar. Grief had settled into her bones like winter damp, but today, curiosity flickered, same way sunlight caught dust motes above sagging shelves. That old novel, its cover faded to color of weak tea, whispered something reckless. She'd stumbled into this book swap by accident, really. A flyer tucked into her grocery bag, bold letters declaring no sad silos here with a doodle of a grinning book. Dry humor, that. Woman wasn't some lonely widow waiting for plot twists to rescue her. She'd survived 3 decades teaching primary school kids who'd rather chase footballs than parse pronouns. Yet here she was, clutching Guernsey literary and potato peel pie society like a life raft, wondering if shared stories could stitch up what loss had unraveled. First meeting vibes were uneven. A retired nurse dissected metaphors like surgical procedures. A young mum hid yawns behind Eat, Pray, Love. But when creator admitted she'd read same page 17 times since her husband died, silence didn't pity, it leaned in. Next week, someone left a battered copy of Gilead on her chair with a post-it, "Try this." It bites back. Months in, Clara's doubts still nipped. She misstepped, recommending a grief observed to a woman fresh from divorce court. Bit on nose, love, came reply, followed by a rye toast with tepid tea. But group's rhythm grew stubborn, like her push to organize a pop-up event in shop's drafty corner. They read memoirs, mysteries, even a romance novel that made them cackle over custard creams. Pages became passports to places grief couldn't freeze. One drizzly Tuesday, creator arrived to find old novel, Stoner of all things, back on swap shelf, dog-eared chapter 6. Inside, a note in shaky cursive, "Keep going." She laughed, sudden and sharp. 60 years in, and she was still being schooled by paper and ink. Fight wasn't about moving on, it was about turning pages together, even when story ached. By summer, Primrose Pages hosted a proper event, Books That Burned Us Alive, complete with wine that cost more than paperbacks. Clara wore red lipstick, a small rebellion against beige expectations. Room hummed, not with polite chatter, but messy, magnificent noise of people who'd learned grief could be a shared shelf, not a solitary cell. And that old novel? Still passed hand to hand, spine cracking further, its edges softened by use. Just like them. Clara's 60-year-old fingers traced a cracked spine in dim glow of her favorite bookshop, its pages whispering secrets only grief could translate. For months, she'd lingered in shadows, clutching that old novel like a life raft, her late husband's last gift. But today, spine straightened with resolve, she marched past shelves of Dickens and Du Maurier, plopped book onto a table stacked with fresh reads, and declared it part of a community book swap. No fanfare, just a gutsy move that left her pulse racing. "I'm writing my own story now," she thought, ignoring skeptical side-eye from Marjorie, shop's resident cynic, who'd once scoffed, "Books can't mend a broken heart." Yet by week's end, vibes shifted. That battered novel, dog-eared, tea-stained, crammed with margin notes, became club's unexpected mascot. Strangers gathered, swapping dogged paperbacks and harder truths. Clara, ever accidental ringleader, fumbled her way through hosting duties, spilling Earl Grey on a first edition, oops, but laughter tangled with tears as stories wove a safety net under their collective grief. Then came Twist, a local journalist, nursing her own loss, caught wind of Meetup. Her article, How a 60-Year-Old's Bold Book Swap Sparked a Healing Movement, went viral overnight. Suddenly, Clara's tiny rebellion had a spotlight. Marjorie, arms crossed in back row during their next meeting, blinked back stunned tears as room erupted over dog-eared page 42, where Clara's husband had scribbled, for next chapter, "My love." Crowd swelled, but Clara kept it real, quipping, who knew grief had a waiting list? By month's end, bookshops across London replicated her model. And as Clara tucked another weathered novel into swap pile, she grinned. Loss hadn't dimmed her, it had handed her a pen. Clara's 60-year-old fingers traced a cracked spine in that musty London bookshop, its pages whispering secrets only grief could translate. 3 months after losing James, she'd wandered in seeking escape, not expecting a dog-eared copy of Middlemarch to become her compass. But books had a funny way of rewriting destinies, especially when shared. What began as solitary reading morphed into scribbled notes tucked between chapters, then a handwritten sign taped to shop's foggy window, Lost and Found Book Club, bring stories, leave healing. Soon, mismatched chairs circled like a patchwork quilt every Tuesday. A retired teacher clutched year of magical thinking, her laugh lines deepening as she admitted underlining same paragraphs woman had. A young mum, weary from sleepless nights, swapped thrillers for poetry and sighed, didn't know my heart needed this. Even shop's tabby cat, Mr. Puddlesworth, approved, napping atop a pile of donated books like a furry literary critic. Clara's odd habit? She always brought biscuits shaped like punctuation marks, commas for pauses, exclamation points for breakthroughs. Grief's got bad grammar, she'd say, nudging plate forward. Let's edit it together. By spring, their swap shelf overflowed. Dog-eared mysteries, memoirs with coffee stains, even a first-edition Pride and Prejudice left anonymously. Each carried scribbles in margins, page 72, this gutted me. You, or read this one aloud, it sounds like hope. Creator watched a widow hesitantly take Tuesdays with Maury, then return it weeks later with a new bookmark, a train ticket to Edinburgh. He loved trains, she murmured. Going where he couldn't. That tattered Middlemarch now sat on shelf, its spine repaired with gold tape, a nod to Kintsugi, to broken things made beautiful. Clara ran her fingers over its cover, grinning as Mr. Puddlesworth batted a semicolon biscuit onto floor. Outside, rain painted cobblestones silver, but inside, stories hummed like a kettle on boil. Grab your favorite book, underline lines that break you. Then pass it on.